Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to learn about engines. So this engine is a 4-cylinder GM or General Motors engine that my friend dropped off for me to play around with for this video. So this is the bottom of the engine, and usually there would be a casing around this, but I already took it off. And as you can see right here, this is called a crankshaft, and it is connected, and when you turn it, the pistons will move up and down, creating your engine rotation or movement. And here's that motion again, and you could see the actual pistons moving. So there are a few things you need to know when learning about engines, and one of them is that the cylinders are offset. And on this specific engine, the two middle ones are at the same spot right now, and then if I were to turn it a little bit, you can see the two end ones are now at the same spot. From the bottom crankshaft side, you can see the two middle ones right here, 1 and 2. You can see the rod connects here and the rod connects here, and these two are both level. Same thing with the two end ones. As you could see, the rod connects here and connects here, and these both are even with each other. So there are a few more components about the crankshaft, and one of them is this gear right here. So as you can see, there's a notch right there. There's two notches right there. There's another notch right there. And another notch right there, there, and there. And what those do is a sensor will sit right in here, and it'll look down onto that gear, signifying and knowing where those notches are. And that'll send a electrical signal up to the spark plugs, which let the spark plugs know which cylinder to fire in and what order they fire in. And the last thing to know about a crankshaft is these two things right here. Now these right here are called counterweights. And basically what that does is when you first start the engine and it starts turning, these weights are opposite of the piston. So when the piston is in its farther outmost stroke, these weights are going to be here. So when it swings back around, it's going to want to keep turning and not stop. So as you can see there, that's the counterweight, and that basically is opposite of the piston. And what it does is it keeps the rotational movement moving in the engine. So if you don't know how an engine works already, basically what happens is when the piston reaches the top of the cylinder, an explosion will happen, sending the piston to come back down, and then the next piston will go up, and then same thing, and it happens basically constantly, and the counterweights just keep that rotation moving. So how does the engine know when to send that spark and that gas and air mixture in there? So we already talked about the spark with that gear and the little notches, but to let the engine know when to release the air and the gas mixture, this right here, these two gears right here, 1 and 2, this is a 2-to-1 gear ratio. So that means every 2 spins of this gear is 1 spin of that gear. You can see that motion here. So what this gear right here is connected to is another shaft that runs along the whole length of the engine. And when you spin it, like I said, with that 2-to-1 ratio, the crankshaft will spin faster than the shaft right there, and it's called a camshaft. And they have these egg-shaped little notches in them that push rods up and down, sending it to the top of the engine. Over here on the other side of the engine, and as you can see, in all these little notches that are running along, there'll be rods coming out here through this hole, all these holes right here. And this is what you call the head of an engine. And basically those rods will come up through these holes, and it'll push springs, and when the springs are pushed down, they open and close the valves on the head of the engine. So up here is the top of the head, and this will be mounted on the top of the engine right there, and this engine is sideways, but up here there's going to be things called rockers and springs. So those pulls or valves going up and down really fast will move that spring up and down really fast, moving that rocker, and that spring basically just sends the rocker down to a neutral position, and that pushes valves up and down, squirting gas and air mixture in there, and also sucking out the exhaust. So right here are where the tops of the cylinders would be, and right in these holes there would be those valves, and they basically just move in and out, closing and opening to let those mixtures or taking out the exhaust in or out. And these 4 holes on the side is where the exhaust comes out. So you could see an exhaust head here with 4 ports, and then it'll lead into one exhaust. So as you can see at the top right there, that is the head of the engine, which I just showed you. And those 4 tube parts is the exhaust manifold. And those are those 4 big holes that I just showed you. And that leads to the muffler and eventually out the back of the car. So on this end of the engine is where a clutch would be in a manual transmission, or an automatic clutch in an automatic transmission. And then this is where the drivetrain would go through to the rear wheels. And on this side of the engine is where a fan would be connected to this rod right here, cooling down the radiator and the engine. And the radiator on the engine, I'll show you on my dirt bike, it's right in there, and also on that side. It basically holds a mixture of antifreeze and water, and it sends it through the case of the engine, basically cooling down the cylinder so that the engine does not overheat. And antifreeze is in that mix just so it doesn't freeze in the winter. Alright, so now I'm going to try to take out this piston over here for you guys. So to take off a piston from an engine, you're going to have to rotate the crankshaft and find these 2 bolts where the rod connects to the actual crank. And you're supposed to loosen those. I've already loosened these. You cannot do these by hand. I took a little while doing it with these wrench right here. And once you get those 2 bolts off, you're gonna have to pull this little piece off here, and then the piston is free. So I got the piston off, and this is what you call the head of the piston and the connecting rod of the piston. And to connect it to the crankshaft, this will go onto that bolt, and the crankshaft will sit in between there. And that's it right there. It goes around there. And you can see the cylinder walls. So another name for the cylinder walls is the bore of the piston. So the diameter of this is the bore. So there's a few things I want to teach you about the head of this piston. And one of them is this right here. There's actually 2 of them. These are called piston rings. And basically what they do is they look a little bit big now. They're bigger than the cylinder. But when you push them together, they'll squeeze really tight against the actual bore in the block. And it basically prevents oil from dripping down into the case or the crank. So that's it for this video, guys. Hope you learned something new. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.